Yo guys, how's it going? And welcome to another episode of a chat where we talk to big personalities or big players in the competitive scene and in For Honor in general. Today we've got Mr. Setmyx, basically the #1 peacekeeper worldwide. In terms of tournament wins, 1s, 2s, and 4s, I believe. He's got the best record of any peacekeeper. Yo, Setmyx, welcome to the video, my guy, or to the chat, or whatever.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you aboard, my guy. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in For Honor, and why are you still playing all this time later?
Yeah, sure. Well, before I started playing For Honor, I used to play different competitive games. Like, I used to play WoW a lot, like World of Warcraft, or what's it called, Brawlhalla. I played that a lot as well. So I already used to play competitive games, especially fighting games. I like them a lot. That's my favorite genre, pretty much. And I started playing For Honor in open beta, I believe. It was an open beta, I think. Yeah. And I first started playing with the Warden character. It's
oh yeah, big hero.
Yeah, big hero with the big 50-50 abuse.
Yeah, got a lot of stick for that to start, I imagine.
Yeah. And I first started playing duels with the Warden, so I didn't really like 4v4 game modes. And that was mostly because, like, if you play duels, you can't really blame losers on anybody else. You can just blame yourself. And that's basically what I wanted, because after playing WoW for like 8 years, where you can only play team modes, there was no 1v1s. I just wanted to play for myself a bit, so just to see how well I can do on myself. And yeah, after I think like 8 months or 9 months, I decided to finally swap mains from Warden to Peacekeeper. That was because I got asked by Clutch to join his 4v4 team, UDA.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, I needed to play a hero that is viable in 4v4s, and Warden's one of the worst heroes in that game.
Of course.
So I basically decided to swap to Peacekeeper, and I wanted to become one of the best players in the game, obviously. And Clutch wanted the same, because otherwise he wouldn't have fucking asked me to join UDA.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't be very competitive, would it?
Yeah, of course. So after those 8 or 9 months, when I joined UDA, I picked up Peacekeeper. I started playing a lot of matchmaking, even though I didn't really enjoy matchmaking anymore, because after you played matchmaking for so long and you played competitive scrims, duels in that case, you kind of get used to playing against good players, pretty much. You get used to a whole different mindset. At least for me, it was that way. Matchmaking kind of felt rather boring. I would have loved if there was a ranked mode that was alive.
Yeah, for
like
sure. I mean, I think I know where you're going with it. Matchmaking feels extremely uncoordinated.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just messy, and you know, you die to silly things because they're so bizarre to actually go for an opponent that it lands, because there's no way you could like see that coming. I mean, I've died to more Warden top heavies in matchmaking than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, I guess that happens to all of us. It happens to the best, because in matchmaking, players just do things you don't expect them to do because they're super unsafe. They don't really do things you should do. So
yeah, you can get beat for hard, man. You can get beat really hard in MM. I mean, exactly. I've had some disastrous streams.
I think all of us. So after I joined UDA, we had many competitive scrims, and like when I now look back to those scrims, I still have the recordings of them. I can definitely see how, especially I myself, improved on Peacekeeper a lot over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So that's basically how it all happened, pretty much. All I did was I was playing the game, and naturally improved on it with competitive scrims.
Well, and what would you say, Setmyx, is the best way to improve in the game?
The best way to improve in a game? Well, I guess the best way to improve in this game is to play the game, obviously.
Well, that's a start, yeah.
That's a start, of course. Like, you shouldn't get frustrated when you lose games sometimes. Like, that happens to all of us. Like, even if I made a 4-stack with whole UDA, actually, with me, Clutch, Onikin, and Wings, we still probably lose like 1 or 2 games in matchmaking. That just happens. You can't win every single match. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing you can do to improve is you play the game a lot, and if you lose to someone, you just keep rematching, because the best way to learn is if you lose. Because if you lost a game, there's something you did wrong. And you have to think about what went wrong in that game. Why did you lose? That's very important. Like, you shouldn't find excuses like they just turtled or they just lagged or whatever, because excuses like that won't help you improve.
I mean,
right?
yeah, this is echoing what Scorebrand, for those of you who don't know, said last week when I asked them about it. You know, that competitive perspective where, you know, you're not crying about shoulder bash spam or crying about, you know, turtling or something like that. I mean, because if you're playing a Lawbringer, you have to understand you're not going to open up someone who's not attacking you.
Exactly.
You know, sometimes, you know, you have to be aware of the limitations of your hero, and if you want to be competitive, you're going to have to pick someone viable.
Exactly.
What constitutes Setmyx? No, go ahead. I'll ask you after.
Yeah. Well, what I think is also very important is recently we have gotten a lot more guides on Reddit from many top competitive players. Like, there is a Nobushi guide from Alonikin, there is a Centurion guide from Haley. Like, so many guides have been created the past couple of months, and I think if someone really wants to improve, you should definitely check out the competitive Reddit and read those guides from those top competitive players. And they should definitely also join the competitive For Honor Discord, because there's a lot of people that know a lot about the game, and they can definitely help out everybody in pretty much everything. If they have questions or whatever, they can just ask there.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think people should seek out the knowledge that players who have already uncovered it or learnt it or use it already have. You know, I'm always recommending the competitive player streams to people when they want to, you know, really up their game.
Yeah, exactly.
What constitutes a good competitive player from a good MM player, Setmyx?
I think there's a lot of things. Well, first of all, like, what you often hear in Discords or Reddit is you need good reflexes, but I don't think that's the case at all. Like, if you look at Scorebrand or Lernikin, they don't have amazing reflexes. They have pretty average reflex. Yeah, they're pretty average to reaction speed, right?
Okay.
Like, Scorebrand has like around 250 millisecond reaction time, which is pretty average. And that's not something you need. If you have it, that's pretty cool, because you can react to things better, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's not something you necessarily need. I think what's really important is the mentality. That is really important, because if you lose a game and you just say, well, it was bad luck or whatever, you won't improve on that, right? And I think I didn't meet a single competitive player that always finds excuses for their losses, right? They always say like, okay, in that game that went wrong. Even if they win a game, they still say, well, we could improve on that, or we didn't perform on our best because we made mistakes. And in every game you will make mistakes. Even if you win the game, there's probably something that went wrong. That's one of the important things. But other than that, there's just, you have to really practice. That's really important. You have to practice and really have to invest a lot of time into the game. Because what people have to understand, there's not only reaction time and mind games, there's also things like game sense. Because For Honor isn't a traditional fighting game, right? It's more a combination of fighting game and MOBA, pretty much. And game sense is really important. Because if you don't have game sense, you're not aware of things, situational awareness, you will not perform as well as other players. Because if you don't know things happen, you can't really do things about it because you didn't know it's gonna happen, right?
Sure. Well, like, I see this. I watch a lot of scrims. You know, I watch a lot of you guys and For Glory and Competitive For Honor streams, like on the side when I'm doing things on my computer or whatever. And I often see, let's say, in relation to game sense, so a decision has to be made in match. Decision is wrong by this particular player on this occasion, and then that snowballs. Like, that decision's effect for the next couple of minutes of that match are really, really harsh on his team. Like, going here instead of going there, and it might have been a hard decision to make, because not, like, obviously it's not all cut and dry in the moment in these Forest games. But they went somewhere else. It didn't work out. Now, one teammate, one side of the map went very poorly that he didn't decide to go to, and the one he did decide to go to also went poorly, putting his team in a really bad place. So I guess that's in relation to the game sense you're referring to. But it looks like the place to practice that is at a higher level. I don't know how much practice about that you could get in MM.
I mean, you can still practice things like that in matchmaking, because let's say you have random teammates and they randomly rotate to some points. You can still do things about that on your own, sometimes at least.
Well, for sure, you can do something, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the best way to practice those things. The best way to practice that would be with an actual team. Like if you had 3 real teammates, because you need team synergy, of course. And you need coordination, that's important as well. Like there's so many things that make a team or a player, an individual player competitive, or a top player. So you can't really just say, well, he's top player because of that one thing. Because I think every top competitive player has a certain amount of game sense, reads, mind games, etc., etc. Like there's so many things.
Moving on from that, this is a very popular topic, let's call it, or at least a heated topic. I don't know what to kind of call it, but it's a topic anyway. FHDR tracker. How much credence does that have? How much of an indicator of general skill level is it?
A big problem with For Honor Tracker is that we don't have an accurate way of measuring skill. So For Honor Tracker is pretty much the only way we can kinda measure the skill of a player. The problem with that is that the stats on there aren't really accurate. The For Honor Tracker score, I don't even know how it's calculated, to be real. It's just a number that puts you in a random letter, kind of. Like, we have players up there, I've never seen their names before, and I've never seen them in tournaments or in matchmaking, but for some reason they are in top 10 somehow.
Yeah. And that's where the criticism of For Honor Tracker equals playtime comes
exactly
from, right?
That's pretty much, well, not only because I've seen players with a lot of playtime and they still don't have a lot of For Honor Tracker score, which is why I'm saying I don't exactly know how they calculate that. But I think it kind of works like a ranking system, right? But the problem is it never resets. That's a big problem, because if you take a look at other competitive games, if they have a ranking system, it resets each season.
Oh yes, that's right, yeah.
Exactly, but the For Honor Tracker score always remains the same. It never resets. So if you have a player like, I take Playfiends as an example.
Okay.
You played For Honor for like, I don't know, 5,000 hours, for example, right? And you farmed a lot of For Honor Tracker score. He can just take a break from the game for several months, which is what he did, and still remain in the top 10.
Okay, I think I see what you mean. Yeah, you don't lose relevance from lack of play time, despite being away. When the game changes and whatever else, and maybe the player-based skill level has risen, there is no degradation, or what is it called? Degradation, eroding.
Yeah, it is.
I can't think of the right word. We'll go with that. There's no degradation of your score for leaving.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. So you're not losing your score, it just continuously accumulates over time. You don't seem to get a negative return on it. At least on my own, I haven't noticed a negative any negative on it at all, ever. Apparently I'm amazing, according to FS Tracker, yeah.
Which is why I don't think it's an accurate way of measuring skill. And the other stats aren't accurate either, because like win rate doesn't say a lot about players. For example,
yeah, what you're up against.
Yeah, exactly, because you could have someone with a win rate of 10% because he kept rematching a player that beat him because he wanted to improve. So I don't think the win rate is an accurate way of measuring skill either. Nor is the KD, because
Score mentioned that last week too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like his duels win rate was not the way he wanted it because he rematched a lot of people when he first started. It's the same account.
I mean, you have to improve somehow.
Yeah.
I guess your win rate is going to be worse if you keep rematching better players. So
yeah, and it's going to be better if you're a team of 4 and you're in the current matchmaking system in For Honor. So it's wildly inaccurate in cases. I think there's something to be said for in that, well, we can say that this person is very experienced in playing the game. At what level they've already experienced that, you don't like whether it's competitive or not. Probably not if you don't see them in tournaments. But you can say for like the level below competitive players, they're probably pretty good for the level below competitive players.
Probably yes. I guess it could be used for that, yes. But I don't think it can be used in a competitive environment at all. Because
No.
like, the only thing that really matters if you want to measure skill from a player in a competitive environment is the results in scrims, in tournaments, and how he performs in tournaments. Because like you could be unlucky and get counterpicked in a tournament round one. So you could have really been unlucky, and just people gonna like, okay, he lost round one, so he's pretty bad. But I think it's not only the result matters, but also how he performed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the only accurate way we have of measuring skill, because we don't have anything else. There is no ranked system, no real ranked system.
Yeah.
Because like the ranked we have is dead, and you can get placed in Diamond 5 for some reason.
At Diamond 5, yeah, we're all Diamond 5 players, boy.
Yeah, like you can take an example like Legion, for example. Like he will just place Diamond 5 every single time ranked gets reset, because I don't even know why you're able to place yourself in Diamond 5, but he always manages to do so.
Let's go, man. Let's go. So, how did you make that transition from Warden to PK? Did you find that jarring at first? Like you were really dedicated to Warden for a long time. Did you find it easy to pick up?
At first it was kind of difficult, because I only played Warden in 1v1s, and then I started playing Peacekeeper in 4v4. So it was an entire different game mode with an entire different hero. Like, Warden is solid guard, Peacekeeper is reflex guard. I don't have a bash anymore, so a lot of things were really different. So at first it was kind of hard to pick up, but I think what you keep is your fundamentals. You still know how to block attacks, you still know how to parry attacks, you still know how to attack, pretty much. And you still know what your opponents can do. So it was only a matter of time, because the only thing I had to learn really was PK's moveset and how to use it effectively. So at first it was, of course, kind of rough, because like entire different game mode, entire different hero, like I said.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be. I expected myself to be a lot worse, and it would take a lot of more time. But the game itself isn't really hard to learn, it's just hard to master. So, yeah.
Sure. I feel like Score said something similar as well last week. I see a theme running between the competitive players from Oscar the first weekend and now you today. What do you think of the game's future? We've E3 coming around the corner. They've teased a new hero. The hero looks like maybe Middle Eastern related or whatever. My guess is it's a Knights faction hero, possibly Viking on a long shot. What do you make of the future of the game? They're still investing quite heavily in it. And what do you make of the devs' input and how long they've stuck with it?
Well, I mean, if we just take a look at the entire roadmap of For Honor, right? They improved so many things. Like if you compare Season 1 to Season 6, so many things have changed, and the game has gotten a lot better in terms of balance, stability, pretty much everything you could imagine. Like we had car brake feints at the beginning of the game, and now we barely have any exploits. Sure, there are still some around, but they aren't really used, and they're probably banned in tournaments anyways, because they're easy to look after and to ban. So I think they already improved the game a lot, and I think they're going to continue to improve the game a lot. As we can see, they already announced many things that are going to happen. They kind of teased a new hero with their new trailer, and they said it many times that they want For Honor to live for at least one more year. But I personally think it's going to live even longer if they continue to improve it this much. So I think the For Honor future could be quite awesome. Like the player base itself is pretty big compared to other fighting games.
It's actually, I can be, you can correct me in the comments below, guys, but I believe that it's by far and away, by a long margin, the biggest fighting game, if we're to put it in the category.
Yeah, like the player base itself is pretty good. The only thing that is kind of small is the competitive scene. Like, but also competitive scene is growing a lot recently, because the competitive players are so passionate about it they try a lot to make they make new tournaments every week now. We have ESL 1v1s every week. We have 4v4 tournaments from Endervex. I think they're every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, yeah.
Exactly. And we have Mistress Mayhem 2v2 tournaments.
Oh man, that's always a poggers one, dude. That's always a poggers one, man.
They're always amazing. Like the competitive scene has so many amazing tournaments, so many amazing players. We have players like Bodrat, who really contacts every single player there is to form new teams for the tournament.
Yeah, he's like a super agent.
Yeah, it's fucking amazing. So the competitive players are really passionate about the game. And I think if the developers and the competitive players work together hand in hand, I think the competitive scene could grow a lot faster and a lot more than it already does. So
sure, I'm like from a personal standpoint, I'm very excited about the competitive scene, and you know, going up against, you know, trying to do my best, learn a bit more, learn from you guys, and going up against you then in tournaments and things, and seeing other players come in and new teams and people I've never seen before, new faces and all this.
Exactly, yeah.
It's looking quite good at the moment for the future of the competitive scene.
It's really good, yeah. I mean, if we just take a look at the last 4v4 tournament, like the biggest Reddit tournament we had like 6 months ago was like 12 teams, I believe, and the last For Glory tournament had like 18 teams. So we can already see
That's
growth in the scene. That's a lot actually, because that's like 6 more teams. That's 6 times 4.
Shout out to the Russian player base in the competitive scene. I'm seeing more and more teams from them. Yeah, like in these tournaments in recent months, and they're improving drastically quickly.
Yeah, they really are. That's really fucking amazing. It's like the thing is, what people have to realize is if you play in a tournament, it's not only about winning. Like the tournaments are a playground for players that seek improvement. They all want to improve, and winning is really just the fruits of your labor. Like I always see people saying, "Why would I participate in a tournament
if I'm not going to win?"
Exactly. Yeah. Why would I try? I'm not going to win. But it's not about winning. It's about improving. You're going to meet really good players in tournaments, and you can probably catch 1 or 2 things from them that you didn't know. So playing in tournaments should really be with the focus on improving rather than winning.
I mean, I totally agree. I played, you know, I've started trying to get into it recently, and I don't really go in with the idea that I'm going to smash UDA and smash Score and smash whoever else team comes in. I'm coming in to compete against them and give it a shot, you know, and kind of enjoy that learning process at such a high level. What advice would you give Setback for, I'm going to say peacekeepers, because you are the best peacekeeper globally. So what advice would you give to peacekeepers that are, like, I see a lot of PKs that are kind of decent, I see some that can do a lot of damage, do pretty well, but I rarely see PKs on your level. What would you say to a PK? Or an assassin, maybe even. I know you're good with the assassins in general. Stepping it up from, let's say, intermediate to competitive.
Well, there's many things. Well, I guess the most important one is to play patiently, especially with Peacekeeper, because Reflex Guard is kind of hard to deal with. If you just spam attacks, you're going to get hit and you're going to die. But people kind of underestimate how good Reflex Guard can be in team fights. Like if you watch my streams or Kihu, we barely die in teamfight situations, even though we play with Reflex Guard, and people say it's really hard to block attacks with it. It's really not. Like you really have to like that's another thing that is important for game sense, right? If you know what you can external block and what not, you can kind of defend yourself pretty easily with Reflex Guard even. And especially with assassins, you need to utilize your dodges, because assassins have the best dodges in the game.
Yeah.
They have the best range for it. They have 600 ms dodge recoveries, which is decent. So you really have to utilize your dodges, your positioning, and like you don't want to over dodge, because if you over dodge you get guard broken, obviously. Yeah. But I think dodges are a really good way to position yourself in a really good way to get an advantage over your opponent. Because if you position yourself well, you can first of all see the entire battlefield pretty much, and you can see what your opponents do. Like you can see if they're going for a back cap, you can see if they're trying to gank someone. It's really easy to see things if you position yourself well. And I think that's really important. Many people underestimate that, and I mean, you can really find openings.
one of the first things I struggled with, like realizing when I played against players your caliber and the other guys, when I came across you, is spacing. Like I didn't realize how bad my spacing was until I was getting like consistently hammered. When I ran into two guys, I was like, you know, I'm always fucking missing them, dude. And the kind of, you know, the penny dropped, and I was like, it's because look at the distances they're keeping, and look at the angles they're at, and things like this, and look who they're locked onto, and you know, all these little things.
Exactly, it's really important that you know what your hero is capable of, right? You need to know, okay, how far does my light attack track? How big is the hitbox? Because if you know how far you can track with your attacks and how big their hitboxes are, you can really start playing around with target swaps, for example. Because like with Peacekeeper, the thing is, your target swap light attacks, they have a really big hitbox.
Yeah, I have
really
noticed.
Underestimate that a lot.
Yeah,
people underestimate that a lot.
They're actually insane.
Yeah, they actually are. And if you position yourself well with dodges, you can kind of really 100-0 your opponent with your target swap light attacks.
I mean, relatively safely.
Yeah, safely, yeah. Because they can't really do much about it. They can parry it, they can block it. So, yeah, it's really a good way to, first of all, for spacing, because if you know how far your attacks track, you can play around other attacks. Because if you know that, the best example I can give is if you know that your zone attack has better tracking than Warlord's headbutt, you can kind of space it that like his headbutt always whiffs, but you're always in range for a zone attack. So you already have an advantage because you can attack and he can't. So that's really important.
And that comes back to the spacing, the range of your attack versus the range of your opponent's, or like let's say the range of your opener versus the range of your opponent's opener. You know, he's going to have to walk forward into you.
Exactly.
Well,
the best example for that. Exactly. The cool thing is about Peacekeepers, you can really frustrate your opponent. That's a really important part, because first of all, you're really fast with Peacekeeper. You have good hitboxes, good range, good dodges, and that can really frustrate your opponents. Because when I 1v1 the Warlord recently, I really kept my spacing. He couldn't really attack because he wasn't in range with his attacks. The only attack he was in range with was his zone attack, and his zone attack is 600 milliseconds. That's a free parry. So I could zone whenever I wanted, but he couldn't really attack, and it really frustrated him. So he kept charging towards me, which led to him running into my attacks, so I couldn't really block them. So I think frustrating your opponent with spacing is a really important part if you play Peacekeeper.
I mean, that's actually how I got beat quite badly when I entered the ESL tournament last week. I got murdered on spacing. With that setback, is there anything you'd like to say to the community, or do you want to shout out to Twitch or something like this? Where can people find and see you, Twitter, etc.? Just to let them know where they can get a glimpse of the gameplay and all this jazz.
I do stream on Twitch sometimes. I usually only stream competitive scrims, only 1v2 or 4v4, or tournaments. So, and I still have my VODs up there, so if people want to watch that, they can do that if they want to. I also have a YouTube channel, which is inactive at the moment, but I have plans for the future to upload the scrims there as well, so people can always rewatch them if they want to. So maybe they can catch one or two things I didn't know about PK or whatever hero I'm playing in the scrim. And
I see you experimenting with a few other heroes recently too. So I guess, guys, that's about it. Thank you very much, Setmyx, for your input and for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, with that, I will leave a link to various Setmyx related socials, channels, streams, and all that pizzazz. And with that, have a good one.
Goodbye.
So you wanna be hardcore with your hat to the back, talking about the gaps in your raps, but I can't feel that hardcore appeal that you're screaming. Maybe I'm dreaming. This ain't Christopher Williams, still some MC got the feel one. Caps, I got the feel some.